All right, well, welcome to everyone who's joining us today for our webinar. My name is Dan Bromberg. I am the Director of Academic Programs for the Carsey School of Public Policy. And I'm joined today with Bobbie Burgess, and Bobbie's an alum of the program and will share with us a bit about what she's doing these days, and how the program fit into those career goals that she has. And we're gonna be open to taking questions from all of you at the end of our conversation. So we'll get started right away. So Bobbie, I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit about yourself, and what brought you to taking the MPP program eventually.
Yeah, so hi for all of you who are listening. I'm Bobbie. I am currently the communications director at this nonprofit in New Hampshire called New Futures. It's a health policy and advocacy organization. And I'm living in Newmarket, just down the road. Couldn't get too far away from Durham. And I'm pretty new to New Hampshire. This is only my second, going on 3 years living in New Hampshire. Before I came up here, I was in DC for my undergrad. I went to Georgetown and I studied government. And before that, I grew up in a small town, well, not very small town. I grew up in Indiana, in West Lafayette, Indiana. It's the same town where Purdue University is. So starting there, I didn't know that I had an interest in politics. As a young child, I was interested in advocacy, but didn't really know that that's what it was. Ended up going to Georgetown to run cross country and track, and was able to explore my interest there, and kind of fell into government. DC does that to you when you're in the hub of politics, really. So in DC, I declared my major eventually as government, and I was able to intern with my senator, Joe Donnelly at the time, and I also joined an organization on campus called the Labor Initiative for the Working Poor, and was able to explore my labor policy interests there. But other than that, I was just a normal government student taking the required classes, and finding my interest in public policy. I remember reading a book called it was by Thomas Piketty, Inequality and Capital and Inequality. And I think that really piqued my interest in policy, and, it talked about the distribution of wealth in our country. And I just felt as though things aren't going that well, and inequality is definitely growing. So that was something that I didn't think I could change, but something that I wanted to continue learning about and focus my career on exploring that. And I knew that public policy was a good place to do that.
Cool.
Good place to start. So
awesome. Thanks. Was there anything particularly attractive about the MPP in New Hampshire at the Carsey School? And could you talk about kind of that decision to come here, rather than other programs? Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, I ran cross country and track at Georgetown, and I struggled to balance school and my health there. So I had some leftover eligibility, and I was looking around at public policy programs in the country that I was interested in, and reaching out to coaches. So I took a few visits, and when I came to New Hampshire and I visited the team here, the cross-country team here, and also came by Carsey, I was just sold completely. I was really impressed with this campus and the thought that went into everything that people did here. And also, I really wanted to take the opportunity to get out of the city. I'm definitely not a city person. So it was just nice to be around trees again, and, easy access to the oceans and the mountains. I really thought it was the perfect place for me. Cool. And I'm really enjoying living here, post-graduation and everything. Yeah, Seacoast is a great place to live.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you talk a bit about how the MPP program helped to shape your career goals? I remember when you first came here, there was some consideration of going to law school. You had mentioned labor law. So how did the MPP program kind of fit into that mix and shape what you're doing now?
Yeah, definitely. I thought that public policy was going to be a stepping stone to law school for me. Looking back, I don't know if I could take that many years of college or of school back to back. So I'm glad that public policy proved to be more than plenty. And I think it took me a semester or two to realize that for myself, that public policy was actually a great pursuit for me. So I think when we went to DC, that was kind of when I started to realize that there were so many career opportunities for me in public policy. And it was almost to the point where it was like, I don't even know where to begin, because there was so many opportunities. It was, you could be doing quantitative research on one hand, and you could be doing communications and PR on the other, and really anywhere in between. And that DC trip was really incredible. I don't know how many meetings we had in those 5 days, but I think it was like 30. Yeah. So you were there, yeah.
We actually just got back from our trip this year. So we had 25 meetings in 5 days.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty full schedule.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, we were meeting with, I remember, an education nonprofit, a smaller organization, but we also went to the Pentagon. We went to the State Department. So there was really no limit, I thought, in what career routes I could take. It was just kind of a matter of really digging into what I was interested in and what I felt my skills were suited for. So
cool. Yeah. So could you talk about that a bit? I guess where your skills have now progressed to, and what you're currently doing, and your role at New Futures, and how that works?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm the communications director at New Futures. It's New Hampshire's leading health policy and advocacy organization. So really, and I just started in August, so I'm still learning, what my job looks like. And, the legislative session actually just started a week ago. So every day is a little bit different. But I am responsible for planning and creating content for our organization, basically. So whether it's social media, print media, graphic creation, a lot of it is creating talking points for our organization too, and for our advocates, for our staff, just so that we are, consistent in what we're trying to change in policy, but also keeping it up to date and interesting, so that people are interested in what we're having to say, and they're not just like, oh, we already read this. So, those are some of the things I'm responsible for. And at the end of the day, through my efforts, it's the hope that I will be educating advocates and educating lawmakers and educating the public really on what health policy changes need to be made in our state, so that we continue to improve the health of our state.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So could you talk a bit about how the MPP curriculum aligned with any of those, tasks or skills that you're bringing to the table, and, your job today? Is there, is there a connection between what you were learning, in the classroom and what you're doing now?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a few classes that really stick out in my head that helped me with the messaging side of my job, which is the biggest part of my job, I think. I'd also just say that all of the classes really helped me lay a strong foundation, give me the tools needed to understand policy landscape in general. So, knowing what questions to ask, knowing what are the important parts of what someone's telling me that I should take away from that conversation. So really understanding policy landscape and being able to apply that to different issue areas. So yes, my interest was labor coming in, but kind of changed to health as I went on, so that I could apply the basic foundational skills to any kind of issue area I wanted to. And that doesn't come from a checklist, you know, that comes from a multidisciplinary course load. So, and that's definitely something I thought I got at Carsey. But the two classes that I was thinking that really stood out were Michael Ettlinger's,
strategy and policy.
Yeah, strategy and policy. So I remember we would do hearings, and we would mock hearings and we would testify. So we would only be given 3 or 4 minutes to, you know, advocate from a certain perspective on why we wanted a policy or why we didn't want a policy. So you have to be very, you know, strategic with your words. You have to have a great idea of what you want to say and persuade that lawmaker or whoever was sitting on the other side of the table. So I think that class was very useful. And then also, I think it was first semester, we did a strategic communications class with the Spitfire ladies. And they came down hard on me at first, but it was a learning curve, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, I'll jump in just quickly. I mean, one of the things I remember, you know, I remember all of our students coming through the program and to watch students go through that class.
Yeah.
So Spitfire's a PR firm out of Washington, D.C. And one of the things we pride ourselves on here at Carsey is that, you know, we're giving students real life skills that they can use immediately, you know, upon graduation, which I'm thrilled that you're using now. But watching students progress through that class is pretty remarkable. And I don't know if you could probably think about some of your peers and your colleagues at that time.
Oh yeah. We were all like, oh my goodness, I've never gotten so many red marks on a piece of paper before. And you can really see, like, we started off not getting great grades in that class, but learned. It was a learning curve for sure. So, and I've definitely been able to apply what I was learning in those classes. And that class and a lot of the other classes in the program were applied. So very hands-on. You're not getting lectured at. I don't think I had a lecture. I'm trying to think back, but I really don't think I had a single lecture class. It was all very hands-on. I'm doing it, you know. And we're working in teams too, so. Yeah,
cool. And then there were a few kind of experiential learning opportunities, right? So you talked a bit about the DC trip.
Right.
You know, we typically have an internship and a capstone. And the capstone is, you know, more project-based. I'm wondering if you could talk about how, you know, any of those experiences, you know, help prepare you for what you're currently doing.
Definitely. Yeah, so my capstone, I did it on affordable housing in New Hampshire and why it's important to bring in, why it is important to bring in younger people into our state, because at the time we were losing more younger people than we were bringing in, younger people being 40 and under. So I did my capstone on that, and I didn't really know, I didn't have a set out thesis. I think I probably should have, looking back, but you know, just kind of went to meetings, learned about the issue, and got involved in local politics, which is such an interesting thing in New Hampshire to do. I mean, it wasn't nearly like that when I grew up in Indiana. So being in New Hampshire and getting involved, going to town meetings, going to, they call them charrettes for housing, new to me until I undertook my capstone. But yeah, so definitely just learn to get engaged through that capstone. And also, so much of housing is messaging and saying the right things so that, you know, everyone can understand what is going on and understand the importance of it as well. So that was my capstone. And then for my internship, I kind of did two. Post-graduation, I did the fellowship with
that's right.
the Exeter, Exeter Policy Fellow. So that was really interesting.
So that was the ICMA, International City County Managers Fellowship. You were with Rustine for that.
So, and that was such an awesome experience. Exeter is a really cool town. They have a lot of resources, so there's a lot more things that they can do and a lot more, innovative things going on there. So it was a great time, and just, yeah, I sat right next to Russ's office, and just people coming in all day long with, typical, like my, let's see, what was it? Like, they're building a structure in my backyard. Why is this happening? Things like that. And watching him and how he dealt with it as a town manager was a very interesting experience, and was a great lesson in civics. So.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I think, from our perspective, giving students the experience to have exposure to these policymaking environments is really important to us, right?
Yeah.
So it's the fact that you could just sit there, watch, learn, reflect, talk to someone who's doing this, is really something that we think is important, as a component of your education.
Definitely.
So it's cool that resonates with you as well. So I think at this point, what we'll do, first I want to thank Bobbie, for coming in and doing this with us. Obviously, it sounds like she has a pretty busy job, and taking some time to do this. We really appreciate it. But we want to turn it over to anyone who's watching us, and I'll filter some of the questions that are coming through. So I have a question that has just come through from online. Can you share more about New Futures and your policy work there?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, New Futures is the New Hampshire's leading health policy and advocacy organization. So that means that we have kind of two wings of New Futures. One is community engagement, one is policy. Well, three wings if you include comms too. But community engagement is working with advocates, trying to get people engaged in the legislative process, and then also the policy staff who are working with lawmakers to make that change. Both are creating a system where we're trying to change New Hampshire politics, or not change New Hampshire politics, create policy change to improve health policy in the state. So that's kind of high level what we do. But yes, we're nonpartisan, meaning that we support policies on, that regardless of their attachment to a party. It's definitely just an organization that wants to improve the health of New Hampshire. So it doesn't matter if it's who it's supported by, if it's going to improve the state's health and overall, that's something that we would definitely want to change and make into law. So
yeah, and I mean, from our perspective, we kind of think about the MPP, as having a strength in this idea of strategic communication, right? That public policy goes beyond just what do the numbers say, right? What does the research say to support this policy?
Yeah.
It's also in affecting that policy through advocacy and through communication. And it sounds like that's kind of what your day-to-day
is.
Is.
Definitely. And right now we're working on, so every legislative session we have about 2 or 3 campaigns that we really put all of our resources behind. So this year the 3 campaigns are drug price relief, there's also early childhood investments, and tobacco 21. So those are the 3 campaigns that we're putting all of our resources behind, but we also support just about any other bill that comes through the legislature that is to do with health policy. In the past, the big one last year was marijuana commercialization and making sure that that didn't happen in our state, and also Medicaid expansion. So, big issues that impact every single Granite Stater. So cool. I'm glad to be a part of the organization.
Yeah. So we have another question. Can you tell me about your internship? What did you do? How long was it?
Yeah, so the internship I did during the summer that was separate from the Municipal Policy Fellow, Municipal Management Association Fellowship. I can't remember the
International City County Management Association. I don't know why you can't remember that.
I know, it's an easy one. I did an internship the summer between my first and second year with the Department of Administrative Services. I was working with Matt Newland, who at the time was, the director of it. And it was, it's geared towards labor policy. So a lot of learning about different, best practices, labor law, and all of those different things that the state employees.
And if I remember, I think there was a new contract that they were working on either right before or right when you were there.
Yep. So their collective bargaining agreement, they had actually just signed it right when I got there, but there was still a lot of things being worked out and being negotiated at that time. So I got to sit in on some of that and learn a lot about that process and negotiations in general. But yeah, very interesting internship. It lasted about, I can't remember how many weeks it was, but it was a whole summer. I would go in 3 days a week and yeah.
Typically the way we think about the internship is, I think Bobbie kind of did it, right after that first year. You do it during that summer, and there are a certain number of hours that we ask students to do. And once again, it is that exposure to that policymaking environment, right? And it could be on the administrative side, it could be on the advocacy side, and we've had students do a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear about all my classmates' experiences with their internships as well. Jadine went to DC. Actually, Gretchen was at New Futures, so she was on the advocacy side of things. But
we had a student in Boston. So it really was, what is your focus? Where do you want to be? Let's make that happen.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I heard great stories from people's internships overall.
Cool. So. Is the MPP program cohort-based? If so, what was it like? So I'll answer the first part, and then maybe you can answer the second part. So in general, yes, it's cohort-based. So that's not to say that there aren't some students that go part-time and kind of pop in and out. But I would say, 80 to 90% of the students are going through the program together as a cohort and graduate, within, if it's not the same graduation date, it might be the one following or the one preceding. So in general, it is a cohort-based program, and maybe you can talk about that experience.
Yeah, that was a really interesting experience. I really enjoyed it because we had 14 or 15 students, and we were all super close. It was like a family. We're in our lounge right now, and we spent a lot of time in here just between classes, after classes, just working on our homeworks together, as much as we could without getting in trouble. But yeah, it was definitely something that, I made friends for a lifetime in my cohort. So definitely a positive experience. And you didn't get that in undergrad. Georgetown wasn't a big school by any means, but you don't have that community in undergrad like you do here. So.
Yeah. And I think some of that solidifies, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, some of that solidifies on the DC trip.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It's a long week together. Meetings from 8 in the morning till sometimes 8 at night. Students are put up in a hotel, so they're in that space together, and we see a lot of each other. So I think it's a nice kind of time to start where that cohort kind of comes together.
Yeah.
And I would also say the first semester tends to be a pretty challenging semester.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
We support each other through that one. And we had most of our classes together. I think actually just about all of our classes together that first semester.
Yeah.
Towards the end, people were taking some of their own electives, but we would still have a few classes together. But yeah, it's really interesting to see where everyone is now too.
Yeah.
And, I have friends in DC and Boston, Oklahoma, all over. So
yeah, I think a couple people landed in the delegation's office, right? So in congressman's office, congresswoman's office. Really, really are all over.
Definitely.
Okay, how long is the MPP program, and what is the start term? Typically we think of it as a 3-semester program. So what does that look like? It's typically a September start date through the following December. And ideally over the summer, right? That first summer, like Bobbie had mentioned, you're doing an internship. And then that final semester, you're doing, a couple classes and your capstone project. That's not to say that some students don't come in with some credits and get it done a bit faster than that, or other students may stay a bit longer than that. So it's designed somewhere for that 3 semester, possibly 4 semesters, on campus.
Yeah, I did 4 semesters. Because I was still running cross country and track, it's like I might as well just do my full 2 years. 4 semesters. And yeah, I was able to graduate in May. And there was a good amount of the cohort walking then too, who either just finished everything in December and wanted to be with everyone in May. But yeah, I took that last semester to do my capstone, which was great. I got to spend, put all my efforts towards that. And like I said, go to meetings, become part of the community. I would recommend either route really.
And then I think, so the fellowship kind of came in, kind of spring, early summer, I think, and then the job started in August. And as far as start term, the traditional start term is the fall semester. And that's kind of the sequencing of the program. That said, it's certainly not necessary that you start in the fall. We've had students start in the summer, students start in the spring, and you just work with your advisor to really make that happen. I think that is that one. Let's see. What is the application deadline? There are various deadlines. So our next deadline, mainly if you want to be considered for funding, is March 15th. The earlier, and that would be for funding starting in the fall semester. The earlier you get in that application, it's rolling. So, the better chance you have, obviously. And our funding is based on resources, and we try to make those decisions, on a rolling basis as well. The hard deadline to start in the fall is a midsummer, about July 15th deadline. And then I think we have time for maybe one more, maybe 2 at the top most. Are there any fellowships or financial aid available? I don't think you ended up doing any fellowships, right? Because you were running. So fellowships, there are fellowships and financial aid available. So the Carsey School offers scholarships, merit and need-based scholarships. We try to do whatever we can to help students, right? Ideally, money is not going to be the obstacle that prevents you from coming to school here. But obviously, there are limitations on what we can do. And fellowships provide students an opportunity to work with researchers across the university. And that turns into just an hourly wage job. You work 15 hours a week, but you are working on policy relevant research during that experience. And we had, I think, a few people in your cohort who were doing that fellowship. So it's a really great experience, and provides a bit more opportunity outside of the classroom. I think we're all set on questions. So once again, I just want to thank Bobbie so much for joining us. It's great to see her. I don't get to see her too often, so having the conversation, albeit on camera, it's great to be able to do. So thank you so much. Good luck with everything
Thank
you're
you, Dan.
doing. Yeah, really a pleasure.
It's really nice to come back to Carsey School. So
cool.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, our pleasure. Take care.